All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Meg Crace. I'm the social worker for the Carpentersville Police Department. We're here today in conjunction with the Jerri Hoffman Child and Family Center to discuss positive solutions for families. Today, our presenter is Javier Ramos, one of the family support specialists from Jerri Hoffman. Thank you for joining us today, Javier.
Thank you for having me, Meg.
All right. Enjoy.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, everyone. As Meg mentioned, I am Javier Ramos. I am the family support specialist at Jerri Hoffman Child and Family Center. So, what does a family support specialist do? I help with the enrollment process for our preschool expansion families, as well as eventually getting to know the families more and helping them get connected with resources. So, when the school year starts again, I might be sending families to Meg for different resources that she might be able to provide, or I might be contacting her for ideas. So we work in collaboration with the community as well, with District 300 and Two Rivers Head Start. So we're just one big happy Carpentersville family. And I also did during the spring this program called Positive Solutions for Families. We usually do it in public, yes, and also face to face. However, because we weren't able to meet with parents, we had to kind of alter the program a little bit, and we had to do YouTube videos and Facebook videos for them. And so this is a 6-week session of positive solutions. And unfortunately, we couldn't do, and actually that was probably the best thing, to not do 2-hour videos, because I don't know how many people could just sit watching me talk for 2 hours. So instead, what we ended up doing was cutting those videos into smaller 10 to 15-minute videos. And then we did for about 6 to 7 weeks approximately. And so we covered different topics, as you will see on the screen. For example, session 1 is making a connection. Session 2, making it happen. Session 3, why do children do what they do. Session 4, what's teach me what to do. And sessions 5 and 6 are facing the challenge. Now, we're going to cover as much as we can on these in the next 30 minutes. And it's not going to be as extensive as it usually is with our sessions. However, in the fall, whatever that will look like as far as meeting with families, we'll probably either do videos as well, maybe through Zoom, or possibly just stick with the YouTube videos, or potentially, hopefully, be able to meet with families face to face. And if that's the case, we will also have some spaces available for our non-Jerri Hoffman families. So that'll also include families that might be interested either from the district or just from the community in general. So it will also include maybe families that might want to participate that are from District 220. So you're always welcome as well. And the first thing we're going to talk about is making a connection. So we're going to cover some little tidbits of each session, just so you can have a general idea of what these sessions encompass. And they're called Positive Solutions for Families, and they're part of a greater model called the pyramid model that is used in a lot of school districts, and also private daycares, as well as nonprofit daycares like ours. So session number 1 is making a connection. One of the things that I do like to tell parents is to identify what quality time that they have with their children. So what we do in the first session is ask them to list all the barriers, then all the benefits. As humans, it's really easy for us to look at the negative parts of things. So it's very easy to just write down all the barriers. Work schedule, and sometimes lack of creativity. Sometimes I only see my child once a week because of split household. Whatever the situation is, we usually write down the barriers first. But sometimes we don't acknowledge the benefits. And if we do acknowledge them, we acknowledge them as something that other people are doing. But when we look at our life, we see that there's more benefits that we're providing to our kids than we give ourselves credit for. So that happens a lot with my families. They say, I don't know if I have any benefits. And I'm like, well, I've seen you do this with your child. You told me about doing this. So I bring it up and they're like, oh, I guess there are some benefits or some things that I'm doing right. I'm like, no, you are doing things right. It's just that a lot of the times we're our worst critics. So that's one thing that we do encourage parents, is to identify what quality time that they are spending already with their child. Quality time also does not mean you sitting down with your child for 5 hours playing. It can mean driving to the doctor's office and having a great conversation, or having them help you cook dinner and talk about how their day went. So quality time just comes in different shapes and sizes. So you might be doing that already, but you just haven't really identified it as a quality time. And remember that quality time does not mean quantity time. So just because you give a child expensive gifts does not mean you're having quality time. Sometimes you don't need to give them any gifts, and all you have to do is give them your time and your attention to really foster that great relationship with them. So the next slide is building positive relationships with our children. And one of the analogies that we use is a gas tank. So sometimes we compare our kids to cars in this program, and that's not a bad thing, because as y'all or most of you have cars, and you know that in order for your car to run, it has to either be on full or it should have some sort of fuel in it. And that same thing happens with our kids. In order for them to be productive and to be positive and to just bring a lot of goodness to this world, they need to be given that fuel. And who gives them that fuel? It's us. It's the parents. You've heard this a lot, and you're going to hear this for many years. Parents are the child's first teacher. In this case, it's always the parents, because especially 0 to 3, they are with you a lot of the time. They are with their child care provider or whoever it may be, but you are the one that is responsible to teach them, survival skills and all these other social emotional skills and different type of skills that they will need, not only at home, but also outside. So that's what building your child up with positive comments is all about. So what you want to do is think of a car also that runs on unleaded gasoline, and you put diesel on it. It's not going to run. It's going to be full, but it's not going to be full of the right stuff, and it's just going to break down, and hopefully it doesn't get to the point where it doesn't work anymore. So the diesel for our kids that are running on our positive comments are negative comments. So you got to think about it this way. If we fill our kids with nothing but negative comments, oh, you're not as good as your brother, or you don't know how to do this, or I can't believe you did that, it's going to fill them of the negative stuff. It's going to fill them of resentment. And not only is that going to be displayed in your immediate household, but it's also going to be displayed out in the schools and out in society. And we don't want that. We want to fill our kids with all the positive comments. And that's what this program is all about, is teaching parents how to identify how to talk to your child so that you can fill them with all the positive comments and be able to just go ahead and have great interactions with them. Now, these are some tips that we do offer in Positive Solutions for encouraging your child. Number one is get your child attention. Eye to eye is very important. If you just randomly say a positive comment like "good job" and your child is too busy, they're not going to receive that. But if you look at them face to face and you compliment them, they are going to know that you're talking to them, you're addressing them, and that you are encouraging them. Tip number two, use behavior-specific language. So a lot of the times, one of the things that we like to say is "good job," but that's it. We don't tell them "good job for sharing your toys," "good job for paying attention," or whatever it is that we are commending them for. We don't elaborate. And remember that whenever it's kids that are in early ed, whether it's somebody that is 2 to maybe 7 years of age, you need to help them build their everyday language. And it's always great to tell them that they're doing a good thing and giving them additional words to encourage them. Also, tip number three, keep it simple. Avoid combining encouragement with criticism. We do this a lot. We do this as people a lot, where we try to encourage somebody, but then we finish off that encouragement with a negative note. So one of the examples that I give in my sessions is a dad and his son washing the dishes. The dad then tells the son, "Great job on washing the dishes. You did a much better job than last time when you hurried up." So what's going to happen to the child? He's not going to remember the positive comment. He's going to remember what's last, and that is the negative comment. The fact that the dad compared his great job to a bad job and remembers only the bad job. At least that's how the child sees it. So that's why it's very simple to just keep criticism away whenever it's needed. If it's positive criticism, it will be done in its appropriate time, but not when you're encouraging your child. And tip number 4, encourage with enthusiasm. So that means don't say, great job on listening. That's not going to sound believable to your child. So you're also not going to be, flashing around pom-poms and throwing a parade for your child, but you're also going to, maybe you want to use some sort of tone that is welcoming and that sounds sincere. I am so excited. Thank you so much for helping out your aunt bringing in the groceries. That was such a great thing you did today, or something like that, with a smile. And that is what tip number 5 is: double the impact with physical warmth. So with a smile, with a hug, with a high five, with a fist bump, I think you're called. And so, you want to double the impact with a physical warmth so that the child knows that it's more genuine. Even if you mean it as a genuine thing, whenever you're busy and you're saying good job for listening, it's better to show it. Tip number 6, use positive comments and encouragement with your child in front of others. So always encourage your child. That one of the concepts that is used here is catch your child being good. And so that means that whenever your child is doing something great, you want to acknowledge it in front of others. Now, there's an extreme where you acknowledge your child for every single thing, and it kind of annoys people that are around you. You don't want to get to that point, but you want to do a nice, happy medium where you acknowledge that your child is doing great in front of others so that they're more inclined to follow that. Then on session number 2, it's called Making It Happen, and we address different topics. So for example, the power of play. And this is one thing that a lot of parents have difficulty with, and they've shared that, I don't know how to play. Of course we don't. It's been decades since we've been kids. So a lot of our play skills are, a little bit dusty, but whenever we have kids, especially toddlers, twos, preschoolers, you need to learn how and relearn actually how to get messy, how to get loud, how to get creative, because they're going to be experiencing that. And if you're in the same boat as them, that's even better in their learning abilities and learning different skills as well. So one of the tips is follow your child's lead. One of the things that I used to do whenever I have my nieces and nephews over, I would want to play the games that I wanted to play, the games that I knew I was good at. And I never asked them, what would you like to play? So the best way for your child or for a child to be entertained and to enjoy the time that they're spending with you is by doing something that they like to do. It's okay to, and I'm going to skip to number 5, it's okay to avoid power struggles. It's okay to not want to control everything. I know that as adults, we like to control everything, but when it comes to kids, sometimes it's good to give them that control. So once your child, if you hate to play hide and seek and your child wants to play hide and seek for 2 hours, guess what? Give up that power. It's helping them enjoy that time with you. And that's what's going to matter the most. Tip number 2, talk about what your child is doing. So they give the analogy in this program of you're being a sports broadcaster and you go play by play. So same thing whenever you're playing with your child, let's say you're building a train track, you can say, this curvy train track gets attached to this other one so that they can, and then you can go ahead and talk about different shapes, different colors, different sizes, and what you're doing in the process. Because remember, we are helping our child build their vocabulary as well, which is going to come in handy later when they are going to build their emotional vocabulary. So talk about what your child is doing at all times so that they can put into the actions that they're doing, they can put words attached to it. Number 3, encourage your child's creativity. If your child wants to do dramatic play and wants to see you dressed up as a fairy or as a dinosaur or a ghost, go ahead and do it. Encourage their creativity. A lot of the times kids get confused with different sounds for animals. Don't go right away and correct them and say, no, a lion does not bark, or a lion does not do this, or a lion does not look like that, because what you're doing is you're discouraging them from being creative. Whenever you have the time, bring in that teachable moment, but at the moment when they're having fun, don't ruin it by trying to, make it a teachable moment. There's going to be plenty of time for that. The next thing is watch for your child's cues. Whenever your child wants to do another game or wants to go to another activity, follow them. Don't just say, no, we have to finish this puzzle. All right, we'll come back to completing the puzzle later. Let's go ahead and play hide and seek. Rules are good whenever they need to happen, but whenever it's something as simple as play, there's less rules that should be followed whenever it comes to play. And then the last, we already talked about it, number 5, and then the last one, have fun together. That's very, very important because that's what's going to matter to your child the most. And along with that, we also talk about helping your child learn to play and make friends. That's one thing that as your child's first teacher, you have to help them so that they can use those skills at school or at daycare or at church or wherever other kids are around. And the 3 things that we talk about is what you can do before the play date, what you can do during the play date, what you can do after the play date. So a good example for that is, let's say that your child has a difficulty sharing. Of course, 99.9% of the kids that are in preschool age have that difficulty, especially if they're only children. So one example that we would use here is, let's say your child has a difficulty sharing. You can talk to them on the way to the play date about the importance of sharing and taking turns. Then when they're in the play date, if you see that there's a little bit of a struggle between 2 friends over a toy, you can bring up, it's good to share, let's take turns. And then if that is done successfully on the way back home, you can talk about how great of a job your son or daughter did sharing. So that way they are aware of different situations that will come up that will be troubling. They are aware of what critical thinking needs to be done in certain situations, and they are aware that whenever something is completed, it is to be acknowledged. Then on session number 3, we talk about why do children do what they do. And that is 3 a little bit, but 4 and 5 are usually the ones that parents want to know about the most. They want to know a little bit more about how to solve challenging behavior, but you can't know how to solve challenging behavior if you don't know the root of it. Once you know the root of that challenging behavior, it's easier for you to figure out what to do about it. And that's where this comes in. What is your child's behavior saying? What is a child trying to tell you? Remember, if you have a child that is 2, 3, even 4 years of age, it's going to be very difficult for them to put into words how they're feeling. It's difficult for us as adults to put into words sometimes what we're feeling. Sometimes we just don't know, and it's just there, and we don't know how to explain it. So we can't expect that from a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. So the best thing that we can do is try to help them find those words to express themselves. And another thing in this topic, in this session, it talks about time out. So whenever your child is experiencing challenging behavior, it talks about how to deal with it on the moment, and that's where timeout comes in as an option as well. So there's 3 steps to timeout that it explains. 1, provide a brief explanation of what happened and guide the child to a chair. So, if they hit their sibling, you can tell her, it's not nice to hit your little brother because you can hurt them. Now we have to go to the timeout chair. Step number 2, set a timer, 3 to 4 minutes only. Sometimes parents want to put their child that is 4 years of age in the timeout chair for 15 minutes. For us, 15 minutes, that's nothing. But for a child, even 1 minute is a lot. And so imagine putting them in 10 minutes. So the best thing to do is just do a 3 to 4 minute timeout and then go ahead and do it calmly. Remember, in all of these situations, we have to try to remain calm, because if we are altered, then our child's behavior and their response will also be altered. And we don't want that. We want to be calm so that if your child's response is altered, they'll eventually go back down and meet us in that point where we're both calm and be able to address any situations and solve them. So be calm in step number 2, and then whenever the timer goes off, then they can come out. There's going to be situations where they will try to sneak away from the chair, but calmly return them back to the chair don't restart the timeout. Just calmly return them to the chair, and then whenever that timeout is done, then you can just go ahead and do step number 3, which is allow your child to return to an activity, but also provide them with a brief reminder of the appropriate skill. Toys are not for hitting, they're for playing, and go ahead and play again with your sister. And then whenever the child does do well, praise them for that. The next part is common mistakes about timeout. And there are certain mistakes that are done. For example, threatening to do timeout. You threaten and it doesn't happen. Your child is just going to ignore you and going to say, yeah, my mom or dad are full of talk. They're just going to say that they're going to give me timeout and they're never going to do it. So it diminishes the effect of timeout. The next one is allowing other children to teach the child that is in timeout. So if sister is in timeout and little brother is saying, ha ha, na 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 na, boo boo, you're in timeout. I'm not. I'm the perfect child. It's just, and you allow that to happen, it's just, the kids already have sibling rivalries a lot. So if you allow that to happen, then the one that is in timeout is going to say, I guess they are the favorite child because mom or dad are not saying anything to him while he's taunting me. So remember to, don't let your other children tease the one that is in timeout. The next thing is applying timeout long after the behavior has occurred. That is something that you do not want to do. So for example, let's say you're in the library and your child decides to hit another child with a book. And then you take them out of the library, but then you have a great time at lunchtime and you're having a blast and laughing. Then you go home and you say, all right, time for timeout. Your child is going to say, what? We just had a great lunch. And they're not going to remember that they were not behaving that well in the library. But that's why it's important for you to address situations at the moment. So maybe timeout is not necessarily the option to go to the library, but what you can do is remind them of the proper way to behave, take the book away, take them out of the situation, and that should be enough, I don't want to call it punishment, because it's not. That should be enough redirection of the behavior. And so in certain situations when you're at home and you do have the chair for timeout, then you can apply timeout. The next thing, there's another common mistake, is scolding your child when putting him or her in timeout. So the child's already in timeout. They're already, suffering the consequences. And then you're in the kitchen saying, I can't believe that you are doing this. I can't believe that you behave like that. You're only making matters worse because you're really hitting them on their self-esteem. And it's not a teachable moment for them. It's more of another teachable moment of a different kind where you are, discouraging them and making them feel uncomfortable and then making them feel, that you don't appreciate them. And all these thoughts start coming to their head, and then you just don't want that to happen. You already did what you had to do, move on. The next thing is that we talk about in this session is making your expectations clear. So that's one thing. You have to tell your child what to do instead of what not to do. And then I'm going to go on to the fourth point that says use of age-appropriate language. Young children have difficulty with contractions, 2 words that are combined to form one, such as don't and can't. Sometimes we tell a child, don't run, don't throw toys. And if they don't know what don't means, they're only going to hear run. You're only going to hear throw toys. And it's going to be a behavior that they might continue doing. And so it's very important for you to say, use walking feet, use indoor voice, and show them what walking feet looks like. Show them what indoor voice looks like or sounds like. And that way they can have a visual, and that way they can have a grasp of the concept. The next thing is clearly and simply state what you expect your child to do. Don't say, be good. What does be good mean for a child? You have to try to be as clear and as simple as possible so that they can understand what you're expecting them, and then have age-appropriate expectations for your child. So I use the example of making their bed. You're not going to expect a 3-year-old to make their bed. Sometimes a 10-year-old doesn't know how to do that, or a 20-year-old doesn't know how to do that. So what you have to do is go ahead and teach your child how to make their bed. Maybe today they can help you with putting the pillows on the bed. Maybe in a couple of months, they can help you with putting the sheets. And then the next month, they can go on to the next level and so on to the point where they can make their bed, so that when you tell them, make your bed, they can't use the excuse, I don't know, because you've already taught them. That's another very important thing, is that you need to teach your child what behaviors they need to do. And you can't just assume that they'll know it. They're not born with a manual on their head on how to behave correctly. We have to help them. We have to teach them that process. And then we also talk in this session about rules for rules. So rules are an important thing to have at home. When you have a child that is an early education child, you do not want to pick 20 different rules or have a rules of the road book for them to follow about household rules, because they're not going to remember them. We might not even remember all of them. So it's always important to pick 3 to 5 rules for them to follow. Another suggestion for this is state the behavior you want to see and be descriptive. What does the behavior look like? Again, be good is not good enough. You need to go ahead and maybe be a little bit more elaborate and pick rules that can be applied in a lot of situations. That way you don't have the 30 different rules. That way you can have some. So for example, clean up after yourself. What does that mean? When they go to the bathroom, they have to clean up after themselves, wash their hands. When they are done eating, what do they have to do? They have to put the plates on the sink, or if they're old enough, they have to wash their own plates. Use an inside voice. Here, you're not saying don't yell. You're saying use an inside voice. Ask before you use something that is not yours, that can be applied anywhere, at school, at home, at the store, wherever they are, and use words to solve problems. Again, another thing that can be used anywhere. Session number 4 focuses on teach me what to do. And this is what we mentioned about not only enhancing your child's everyday vocabulary so they can have more words to express themselves, but then you're also going to be focusing on enhancing their emotional vocabulary. These are some of the tips that are given. Talk about feelings. It's very important for you to talk to your child about feelings and teach them new emotion words. Sometimes happy, sad, angry, those are okay to show a child that is 2. But you can't expect a 12-year-old to only focus on those 3 emotions, because there's a whole bunch of different angries out there. And you have to teach them frustrated, confused, anxious, excited, worried. It's always important to teach those words also in a preschool setting, because kids absorb things so fast that if you add more words to their vocabulary at that early age, it'll just help them in the long run. Another thing is ask your child to tell you how or she feels. Check in with your child, especially right now that we're seeing a lot more rates of depression in kids, and even suicidal attempts, and unfortunately suicidal acts in kids. We want to be able to go ahead and check in with them at all time, and that is something that we should start doing at an early age. Let's not wait until they're teenagers to start checking in on them, but let's start at an early age. How are you feeling today? We go ahead and do an emotion chart, and then the kids can point out to the emotion that they're feeling at the moment, and then talk about why they're feeling that way. So check in with them in the morning, at night, whenever a big, emotional thing happened, an outburst or something. Talk about it with them, so they can know that they can go to you not only now, but when they go into their teenage years as well. Talk about how characters in a book, video, or TV may feel. Also use books and art activities to talk about emotions. So books are not just for reading. Books are not just for the little ones to see pictures. They're actually teachable tools as well. So whenever you see that Winnie the Pooh is sad, talk about why Winnie the Pooh is sad. What made him sad? How is he feeling right now? How can he change that sadness? Maybe playing with Tigger or with Piglet or whatever your child decides to answer. Remember that any answer that they give, as long as they somewhat make sense, that's good. And, encourage it as well. The next thing is accept and support your child's expressions of feelings. A lot of the times you want our child to, don't be sad, or boys don't cry, or man up, or whatever we end up wanting to tell them. Right there, by telling them those things, we're saying, suppress that feeling, but we have to let the kids know that it's okay for them to feel certain ways. Those are all feelings that are there for a reason. You can feel sad sometimes, especially, for example, If your pet dies, you can feel sad. You know, we can't expect them to feel sad only for a couple minutes and then be happy from now on. We have to give them that moment of grief. So it's okay for kids to feel certain ways. Clearly, if an emotion is being felt extensively, then the next step would be, how can I help them? And if it's something that is out of our reach, how can we get the appropriate counseling so that they can maybe not go through depression all the time. So, you know, there's certain levels where it's okay to feel certain emotions, but then when it comes to a point where that's the only thing that they're feeling and you can't help them, then that's when the professionals need to come in as well. We also focus on the turtle talk technique, which is a way, it's a social story, but at the same time, it's a way to cope with anger. And so recognize that you're angry, stopping what you're doing, because sometimes when you're angry, you like to act out in the worst way possible. So stop what you're doing before you do anything else. Then go into your shell, and then your shell can be closing your eyes, your shell can be covering your mouth, although it's not good to cover your mouth right now. Maybe putting your mouth under your shirt, or using our little friend Tucker the turtle as a puppet or a toy to kind of de-stress, and then take 3 deep breaths. And after that, coming out of your shell and coming up with a solution. So that's one thing that we are teaching our kids in our classrooms, and they are enjoying it. They're applying it at home, and parents have told us that they're applying that at home, and it's a good way for them to calm themselves down. This is one for the older kids, and that's the problem-solving steps that we briefly cover in our series. And identifying the problem, think about some solutions, what would happen if you go ahead with that solution, and then giving it a try. So one example for this is 3 kids, and then there's 2 popsicle sticks. So what is the problem? There's not enough popsicles. Think of solutions. Well, I can have one, and then Johnny can have one. What would happen? We will be happy. But what about Susie? She'll be sad. Should we give it a try? No. So then the next thing would be taking all the popsicles and then cutting them into different pieces. That's a solution. What will happen? We will all have small shares of the popsicles. We might not have 1 popsicle each, but we'll have a good portion of them. Give it a try. Did it work? Yes. So right there, we're also helping kids with identifying problems and finding solutions for those. And then lastly, session 5 and 6, which we're going to cover very briefly because it's a little bit more extensive, is facing the challenge. So there's different tips in session 5 that we go over with the parents about what to do in certain situations when your child is or maybe will be expressing challenging behavior. One of them is logical consequences. So logical consequences are an alternate to punishment. That is, if your child is hitting his brother with a toy, what are you going to do? You're going to take the toy away. And then it also says logical consequences must be practical and enforced. If your child starts throwing a tantrum because you took the child away or the toy away, you're not going to say, oh, you keep on crying a lot, here you go. You're not enforcing it. If it has been taken away, take it away and address the situation with him. You can't be hitting your brother with a toy, or maybe not use can't. We use toys to play. See, a lot of the times we use can't because it's in our vocabulary, and we forget that kids maybe don't have that in their vocabulary yet. So the next thing in logical consequences is choices should be stated calmly, clearly, and respectfully. Remember, you must state calm at all times. And logical consequences help guide children in learning how they are expected to behave in the real world, as we have covered previously in this session today. Present reasonable choices. We're not going to read this, but present limited reasonable choices pretty much means don't give your child a book full of options of things to do, because it'll, 1, overwhelm them, and 2, it'll get them used to having a multitude of choices. So if they're younger, go ahead with, would you like sweet potatoes or French fries for dinner? And then that doing 2 or 3 different choices is more than enough for a child in different situations. Don't just, for example, go to the store and say, pick a shirt that you like, and there's a billion different shirts there. It's going to overwhelm them. So pick 1 or 2. And there's going to be situations, as we talk in this series, that you give 2 options and your child might want the 3rd option. Well, if that's not an option, they have to pick this or that. maybe that'll be an option another day, or maybe it just won't be, but you have to pick these two options. Remember, you have to stick to whatever you set for your child. And then the last one for this different ideas that we gave parents is safe first. First, put on your shoes, then you can go outside. So this is a contingency statement first, then. And it helps your child understand that there has to be something done before a reward or before something fun. So if it's not done, you have to stick to it and say, sorry, it hasn't been done. We can't go outside. We can't go play, walk the dog or whatever it may be. You have to do this first. So it allows them to understand, because out in the real world, if they have a job and their boss says you have this task and then you'll get your bonus, they can't just say, I want my bonus now. It doesn't work that way in the real world. So it's best for us to start implementing that in our everyday life as soon as you can. And then we did eventually create a plan with the parents where they try different strategies, and if they don't work, try different alternatives and try giving your child new skills. So I'll summarize these three things with this example. Let's say your child says, all done, and they had something that they don't like on the plate, but you have taught them whenever they're done eating, they can say all done. Well, they didn't throw a fit, so that's great. But they used all done in the wrong situation because you want them to eat. And so the best thing to do is teach them a new skill. Say, take 5 bites or 6 bites and then all done. And so right there, you're kind of swerving away from them probably going into a tantrum, and instead just saying, all right, well, yes, we taught you all done, but this doesn't apply to the situation. You still have to eat today. So then you teach a new skill for them. So that's pretty much what developing a plan is. And lastly, we went ahead with the parents and talked about a family routine guide. And that pretty much gives the parents the ideas of, in this situation, what can be done? And I think this is going to fall shortly. So you see something falling against the lights. In the situation of maybe brushing your teeth, your child doesn't like to do that. What is the reason? Maybe they don't like to go to bed. What is an option? Maybe you can go ahead and create a routine chart with them. That we can let them know that after brushing their teeth, it's time for bed. And then if that doesn't work, what will be done? Well, maybe I can brush my teeth with them, with him or her. And so that's what a family routine guide is, and a family routine plan is. At the end of the sessions, we go ahead and talk about those so that parents can try to do trial and error with some of the different things that their child might be having issues with. Lastly, I do want to plug our Jerri Hoffman Child and Family Center Facebook page. That's where we have a lot of the different videos housed. And we also have our YouTube channel, well, my YouTube channel, where I have the English and Spanish playlist of all the videos. And then I did want to do a shameless plug that we will be doing screenings for our full day 3 and 4-year-old preschool late July when we open our center again. We will also have spaces in our birth to 3 programs as well in the daycare, as well as regular prevention initiative program. So if you want to go ahead and contact us and get to know more information, definitely go ahead. Thank you, and off to Meg.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that information, Javier. I just have a couple of questions for you. Just some things that either I wanted to highlight or just we had some questions about. If I get a report from my daycare provider that my child acted out during the day when I wasn't there, should I give them a timeout when we get home?
It's very similar to the library example that I gave, where if you just go ahead and start telling your child, you can address the situation, but if you go ahead and do the timeout immediately after you come back from daycare, then it's not going to make sense. Let's say that situation happened at 9 a.m. Teachers are doing a great job because they have done a lot of social emotional training, and they implement things like conscious discipline or pyramid model. And so they kind of help the child understand that behavior maybe wasn't right. They use different techniques. And so they already kind of covered it a little bit in the classroom. And so if you go ahead and bring him home and then say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give you time out, but the rest of the day they had a great time at school, they're only going to remember the rest of the day that was great and that they were cooperating, they were doing everything that having fun and all that stuff. So that's not going to have a lot of effect. You can definitely bring up how was your day, and if they do say something about that, or if you say, well, the teacher told me that this happened, kind of reflect on it and reflect on the positive ways that he or she could have done certain things. So maybe they shouldn't have hit their friend. Maybe they should have asked for permission to use the toy. And so it could be used as a teachable moment, but timeout in that specific situation might not work as well.
Okay, thank you. So if my child plays all day at daycare, it's essentially what they do when they're littles, shouldn't they be able to just go home and play by themselves also?
The answer to that is could be, but a lot of the times, remember that kids have been in daycare all day playing with other students, playing with their teacher. They haven't had the chance to play with you. So they're going to figure out somewhere inside of them more energy to, play even more hours. And the best thing that we can do, I know that we have been at work for 8 hours, maybe driving up to 2 hours, in traffic, and we just want me time. Well, we can figure out me time if, let's say, our child goes to bed at 8. We can do something 8 to 10, watch a movie, and maybe check Facebook or whatever that time. But while our child is awake, let's try to figure out different ways that we can play with them, that we can interact with them, and that we can have those not only teachable moments, but memories that they'll retain for many, many years. So we can't expect them to just go home and take a nap and then not want to do anything for the rest of the day. They're going to have more energy. And so we just have to kind of keep up with them, even if we're tired.
And then this is kind of a myth, but I just wanted to go over it really quick. I know you had talked about talking about your feelings and what's all going on. One of the myths is that young boys should not talk about their feelings, that just girls do that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's something that we, luckily, it's something that as the years have passed, more and more parents, especially because many of them have been going to school in this new system of getting in touch with every aspect of your life, including the social emotional aspect. That only has started within the last decade or so. So a lot of these kids that were taught to, be in touch with their emotions are now parents, and it's kind of fading away, but there's still a lot of parents that do say, boys don't cry, or boys should not, have any sort of emotion, just blank stare or whatever it is. It worked 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Unfortunately, it worked for the parents then, but as they are parents now, it is a barrier for them to interact with their child, to create those bonds sometimes. So we don't want our children to continue that cycle. What we want them to do is be aware that it's okay to have feelings at certain times, and it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to want to cry, because if you keep on restricting yourself, if you keep on just holding it in, there's going to be a breaking point, and we don't want that to happen. We want them to, as soon as they have a certain feeling, whether it's happy or sad or angry or any of the other, different emotions that there are, for them to feel it, to express it, maybe to verbalize it, say it to somebody, I'm feeling sad, and then having conversations so that they can get past that. That's what we want our kids to do, and girls have been encouraged to do that a lot since forever, but it's time for boys to also experience that and to also go through that and talk things out and go ahead and feel those emotions and feelings.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Javier, for all of that information. I want to thank everyone for viewing this video, for being with us today. If you made it to this part of the video, then you have an opportunity to win a prize. So every week I've been doing this. I just want to get everybody's involvement, encourage you guys to watch all the videos and see what happens. So today's question is to ask each person in your family, if you could have any career, what would it be? Then just take everybody's answers, send me an email to this email on the screen, or it's listed on the website, on the YouTube page. My email address is everywhere. Feel free to send that in, and then a random winner will be selected to win a prize. All right, if you have any questions, concerns, feedback, themes you'd like to see, feel free to let me know. Send me an email. Always get in touch with me here at the police department if there's anything I can do to help you. All right, thanks. Have a good one.